Have you ever wanted to make video games? Well, don't. Long hours, subpar pay, conflicts with management and marketing, bug fixing, gamers. Ugh. Developing video games is a brutal task that often doesn't get the recognition it deserves. Fortunately, we live in a post-Goat Simulator world, where if you want to do something or be something, there's a simulation game for it. Even the fatherless can find solace in simulation games. That's why in 2012, we were blessed with a simple yet captivating experience that many still hold fondly to their hearts, even over a decade later. Carly Rae Jepsen's Call Me Maybe. And also Greenheart Games' Game Dev Tycoon. When it comes to simulation games, Game Dev Tycoon may be the most lean. No complex graphs, no extraneous bullcrap, no managing your resources like a third world country. You just click buttons, move sliders, and boom, you're on a list. I first discovered GDT around 2014, and it was because of two YouTubers that were big parts of my adolescence. The first, you know how sometimes when you're with the fellas, you'll be chatting the maddest trash talk only to have one thing unfortunately go wrong and then end up having everything else backfire? You're a cuck. You're a little cuck. Yeah, that's Sips playing a business management game, which is exactly why it's entertaining. Many of Sips' all-time series involved him running a business of some sort. Tekkit, Prison Architect, and of course, GDT. He'd come up with these little backstories for every game he published, and gossip about the employees in his office, and other lore tidbits that he'd probably spend a good 2 seconds digging up on the spot.
It's going to take a lot of very technical moaning and delightful groaning.
That serves to highlight a powerful aspect of GDT, the opportunities for you to fill in the blanks with your own imagination. And for an easily inspired preteen in 2014, I loved that. Anyways, here's Donkey.
Here comes the money.
To this day, I still say it's a masterpiece when I describe stuff. This is a top 5 Donkey video, and that's fact. Also, while it's clear that Donkey doesn't understand how to properly play the game and likely just spent an hour with it, he still managed to make it an entertaining experience by filling in the blanks with his own creative spin. Exactly what Sips did as well, which is why this video remains a memorable experience to the present day, and is another piece of evidence that illustrates the simplistic excellence of Game Dev Tycoon. But enough talking about other men. Let's talk about my man. Wait, ladies and gentlemen, meet Spellslinger, my twice removed cousin. His dream in life was to open his own sushi shop. Unfortunately, all the fish in the world of Game Dev Tycoon went extinct, causing the sushi industry to collapse. As a result, Spellslinger decided to just reuse his assets and open a game development studio instead. It's just me, my computer, my garage, and $30,000 I had lying around. It is time for me to make a revolutionary video game.
Don't let me into my zone.
This is gonna fly off store shelves. It took Spellslinger a while to get into his groove since he had to learn how to make games in the first place. He had to learn how to choose a topic, genre, console, and the type of graphics he wanted. Then he had to learn how to adjust these sliders to ensure that his game had the correct amount of focus on the correct aspects. It was tough for him to get used to. Not for me, I just sat here clicking one button on my mouse. Due to his inexperience, Spellslinger struggled to initially generate good design and tech for his games, causing them to be mediocre, and thus he struggled to find an audience. But unlike me in my final year of university, Spellslinger put his head down and studied. He researched features that would improve his games and added them to his homegrown game engine. Slowly but surely, Sushi Shop began pumping out quality titles that allowed them to build a fan base and bring in consistent revenue. They soon moved out of Spellslinger's garage and into their own office, where new people joined the team responsible for making a list. This is the gameplay loop of GDT. Decide what should go into a game, make said game, get it reviewed, sell copies, and repeat, all the while juggling your expenses, your ongoing research into more powerful tools, and story events that mirror real-life events from gaming history. It's a pretty simplistic loop, but it remains engaging thanks to the aforementioned events, and because, if your imagination allows it, you can fill in the blanks of what's happening to create amusing scenarios, like a fanfiction writer. And then Margaret Thatcher kissed my stream of piss. For example, there was a brief period in this playthrough where releases were middling and growth stagnated as a result, and in my headcanon, I attributed it to the fact that people rejected the idea of banning the funny 3-letter word from Jackbox.
In America, we go by this set of rules. It's called the Constitution.
Shut up! But it's more likely so due to the fact that you and your employees don't gain better stats from making games. You can only increase your design, tech, research, and speed skills by training, which costs the same valuable research points that you also need to spend on researching new topics and features. And even if you do pump some research points into training your employees, they won't be able to fully catch up to where they should be, resulting in you firing them and hiring new, better employees that may also be whisked out the door later. It's a vicious cycle that isn't very realistic. Like, what person spends so much time working in one specific field only to not learn anything? Get out of my office. Eventually, Sushi Shop grew large enough to move into a swanky new office, attend E3, and opened up their own R&D lab where they essentially created Steam. By this time, Sushi Shop had achieved bona fide AAA status and were even releasing games of that caliber, but they needed something more. Something to push them over the top into gaming legend. After all, making fun of My Hero Academia can only get you so far. It was time to get on a boat. A sushi boat. The company released their own console to compete with the likes of the PS5, Switch, and Xbox, whatever the series they're on right now is. Sushi Shop managed to also develop an MMO and release it just in time before the story mode ended after December of year 35. And that's my vanilla playthrough of Game Dev Tycoon, which just took me over 6 hours to complete. It was fun, but I do have some nitpicks. MMOs are almost never worth maintaining or even developing in the first place due to their absurd costs. There's also the aforementioned balance problems with stat gains, and I would have appreciated some more interaction with your competition. But while vanilla Game Dev Tycoon is a fine game on its own right, it's like a Pokemon that evolves via trade. To fully unlock its potential, someone else needs to get their hands on it, not like that. That is why the actual best way to play GDT is with mods. Mods can not only fix balance issues, but also add more content, redesign the UI, and most importantly, let us make culture. Out of the way, bozo, it's my turn to run a company through questionable means. Welcome to Pissgoblin Limited, a name that I came up with after deleting my other Pissgoblin save file. Founded by El Goblino, Pissgoblin Limited spent their first few years making some truly dog water games. However, the company was still able to generate a ton of profit early and managed to move into a medium-sized office within just a year and a half of founding. After failing to make Arknights, the company then decided to make their first custom game engine. Yeah, we were able to make a game engine after moving into the second office, which goes to show just how much mods can change Game Dev Tycoon. Let's quickly go over the ones that I installed for this playthrough. First up is the most noticeable of the bunch, the tag mod, which drastically changes the UI to be cleaner and more informative. Extended GDT, Over the Skyline, and the Future Past expansion are all separate mods that add new game consoles, topics, and story events. Staff gain experience from games and learn by doing are here to fix balance issues by regularly injecting numeric steroids into you and your employees' bloodstreams. There's also a few quality of life improvement mods, a couple mods that didn't work, and new anime topics, which allows us to make culture. But Pissgoblin Games didn't need the culture topic unlocked because the stuff they were making was already getting raw dogged on the market. An angry tennis game, a game about a dead meme, a game set in New Hampshire.
Nobody goes to New Hampshire.
Nothing the company created really landed. Perhaps out of pity, the game about fighting over coupons sold pretty well, but Pissgoblin also lost a third of its fan base by releasing DLC for it. Surely something like this wouldn't happen again. El Goblino eventually decided, screw it. The only way for the company to stay afloat was to be completely and utterly shameless. First, they plagiarized Wreck-It Ralph, a move that immediately brought the company's financial situation out of the doldrums. Then, Pissgoblin created a sequel to their angry tennis game that weaponized human vitriol in an all-out tennis-themed global conflict. It was the company's first perfect game. They also made a game about American colonization. That did pretty well too. Around this time, a few growing pains began to plague Pissgoblin Limited. And by that, I mean that I started getting annoyed by a few things. Firstly, having 3 different expansion mods meant way too many research topics, and consequentially, a growth in the amount of stuff we could add to the games, and in turn, the cost of making games skyrocketing. There was a stretch in the mid-game where even though we were making successful titles, we would have to take weeks just to recuperate losses. Secondly, these news articles would pop up every couple of years that were meant to provide immersion, I guess, but their topics are bizarre and don't make a lot of sense. Why is a YouTuber getting arrested in what should be the mid-90s? But the biggest problem is, well, do you remember how if your game succeeded and you had DLC attached to it, you get a decent sum of cash, but if your game underperformed and it had DLC, you'd lose an unreasonable amount of your fan base? Well, there's this really cool trick I found. If you exit this window without picking DLC and your game flops, then you lose all of your fans. They're all gone. Thanos snapped out of existence. And since my last save was 4 hours earlier, there was no choice but for Pissgoblin Limited to try and re-earn all their fan base. All because of a terrible bug that probably won't be fixed, seeing as the mod hasn't been updated in over 3 years. So how am I gonna shoehorn this into the lore? Pissgoblin's ill-fated attempt to plagiarize Kanye's Zone backfired, as all 120,000 fans they once had bailed when the company decided to not release DLC for the game. Another example of the market regulating itself. Get out of my office. Pissgoblin Limited entered their darkest hour. Despite their size and skill, they had nearly disgraced themselves out of the gaming industry. They churned out extremely polished sequels, but the income just didn't flow the same. The company had to turn to working with bigger publishers just to try and rebuild what they once had. It would have been a tragic tale if not for the fact that the company upgraded their computers, upgraded their office, hired some new slaves, and it sat comfortably over $40 million over this entire stretch. While Pissgoblin would have you believe that they were underdogs fighting to regain forgiveness, they were actually more like Madonna crying with a glass of wine in her bathtub in her giant mansion.
It's the great equalizer.
Actually, they were more like 2015 Nintendo deciding what to do with Mario because they just said, screw it, you guys do it. And it worked. Just like with Mario Maker. Pissgoblin Limited didn't just rebuild their fan base, they grew to heights previously unimaginable. Gone was the shamelessness and blatant ripoffs. The new Pissgoblin was something completely different, something new, and something even better than ever before. Pissgoblin Limited proceeded to take the biggest victory lap ever seen in the gaming industry. They hosted their own convention, they released not one but 2 chart-topping consoles, they made an MMO and even released an expansion for it, of course. They also churned out hit after hit after hit, and they even stopped a terrorist attack somehow. They became legends of the gaming industry, all because they stopped releasing DLC. Ultimately, I felt that this playthrough was more satisfying than the first one thanks to the addition of mods. There were definitely some hiccups here and there with graphical glitches, game altering bugs, the fact that it accumulated such a high score at the end that it rolled over. But if you decide to play Game Dev Tycoon, I highly recommend using the tag mod for a better UI and any one of these 2 experience mods, just not both of them though at the same time. Also, don't have too many expansion mods running at once because it becomes far too overwhelming. Other than that, modded Game Dev Tycoon is the way to go. Of course, all this advice only applies if you're not a sinner. In the mid-2010s, Bed Wars became a staple of multiplayer Minecraft servers. Protecting your bed and attacking other players' beds is easy to understand, and much like Fortnite, Apex, and other GPM-type games that came after it, it provides fast-paced, bite-sized gameplay that is essentially a constant stream of dopamine to the brain. Naturally, other options to play Bed Wars would spawn, including those outside of Minecraft. What I'm going for here is that the PC version of Game Dev Tycoon is like Minecraft Bed Wars, while the iOS and Android versions are like Roblox Bed Wars. At its core, they have the same gameplay, but while Minecraft Bed Wars is the original and has more options for play, the Roblox version looks more cartoony and is more limited as an offering. That exact same sentiment carries over to GDT. If you're a fan of corporate cartoon art styles or the art style of a YouTuber's life, then maybe you'll enjoy it mobile GDT's look, but I always felt that it looked a bit tacky. The mobile version also adds headshots for your character, which I'm sure is worth $10 on its own. Yeah, so the Switch version, which is basically just a port of the mobile version, costs 20 Canadian bones. That's dumb, and especially disappointing because ports to Nintendo consoles have never ever been overpriced, approximate to the added value they provide over their original counterparts. Also, it has no mod support, so the PC version is way better. Yeah, it holds up pretty well. Game Dev Tycoon sets out to provide a simple yet engaging business simulation experience and succeeds. It's still just as fun today as it was in 2013 and is well worth picking up. You can often find it for sale nowadays, especially on Steam where it's $5 right now as part of the summer sale. I feel like that's the appropriate price given the game's age, though if you really want to go play it on mobile or Switch, be my guest. Just know that you're missing out on a good chunk of the experience. Get it? Because you won't have mods to increase your stats more easily? Sorry for taking 4 months to make another scripted video. Man, if you're so good at this game development stuff, I'm not, then go ahead, make a blockbuster. Do it.
It's a masterpiece.